Feature Friday, all my quilting friends. Thanks for joining us again. We appreciate y'all being here. Today I want to start talking about borders on your quilts. This is something that we've had some questions about, and so I put together a quilt top with lots of borders on it so that we can work on that together and learn different ways for you to fill in borders. I don't think there's a wrong way or a right way. There's just the way that you're most comfortable with. So I think over the next couple of Feature Fridays, we probably will end up going over the different ways that I found to fill in borders, but you may have found something different that works for you. Like I said, no right way, no wrong way. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. So let's flip around to my quilt and my robotic system so we can take a look at that and get started today. One thing I want to make note of is kind of when you're filling in borders and deciding on patterns to use and going through all of your scaling and everything, you're going to need to know the size of your quilt because you're going to want to figure out repeats and, oh, if I shrink my design down to this size, then I'll be able to repeat it this many times. But if I leave it a different size, it might not work out so great in my border. So, there's going to be a little bit of math involved with filling in your borders. Just take your time with it and remember that you can always use your undo buttons and your redo buttons if you change things and you don't like it. Take your time and have fun. That's what quilting is all about anyway. So let's switch around. So here is the little quilt I have. I've got kind of a centerpiece. It's got a little fox here on it. And then I've got quite a few borders. So we're going to work on filling those in with the different styles of border fill that I have figured out. And then we've got our robotic screen here. Right now, I have my grid spacing set at about 1/2 inch, I think. So I want to go ahead and change that to a whole inch. It's going to make it a little bit easier for me to count my spacing when I'm trying to decide how many repeats I'm going to do with my design. So I am going to just hit my settings button and make sure that I'm in my parameters tab and come down to my grid spacing. And yes, I have it at 1/2 inch right now. I'm going to go ahead and change that to 1 whole inch just to make it a little bit easier for me to count on the display screen. So that's set at 1 inch now. And when I go back to my layout, my grid's a little bit bigger, so it might make it easier for me to count things. So this is where we're going to start with layout, and we are going to add a new layout box by hitting the plus sign here on the right-hand side of the display, and it wants us to set our first point. So traditionally, most of you may be putting in triangles or rectangles or squares for your pattern boxes. We are going to make a funny pattern box that looks like a U shape. So I am going to just figure out here with my machine, right here is my limitation for my table width or my frame width. So I'm going to back it up just a little bit because I don't want to use quite so far down. I don't want to risk hitting my roller bar. So I'm going to start with my first point here. We're going to be doing this border here with this coral colored dotty fabric here. So I'm going to set my first point here, which is the inside of my border. And I'm just going to line my needle up and make sure that I am in between my 2 borders here. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit my plus sign to set my first point. And now it wants me to set the next point of my pattern box. I am going to move my machine to the corner of this area that I want to include with my border. So I want this inside corner here, get that lined up, and I'm going to hit my plus sign. Now I'm going to go horizontally across my frame, and I'm going to trace this line here in between the coral border and the black border because I want this inside line. So I'm going to come all the way over to the end here, to the other inside corner. This is my right side inside corner. I'm just going to double check here on my display that I've got a nice straight line here. Right now my quilt's pretty square on the frame. Make sure I'm here in the corner, and I'm going to hit my plus sign again. Now we're going to come down this side and find our point for the inside border here. So we're going to slide down. And I'm also watching my screen, so I'm watching the lines get created here just to give me a little bit more consistency with my movements, make sure that I've got things lining up comfortably. All right, so that looks like a pretty straight line from one side of the quilt to the other, and I am right here in between. I'm going to hit my plus sign here. Now I'm going to come to the outside of this border. So I'm going to move across to the outside of my border and hit another point. And if you want to hit points along the way, because these are long lines, like if I want to hit a point here, I can hit a point here before I get to that top corner. I'm going to move up to my top corner. And I'm going to hit another point. So I've got another point. And you can see on my screen, it's starting to create that like U shape that I'm marking out here for this border piece. So now I'm going to go all the way across horizontally back to the left, which is the top of this border piece. So I'm sliding all the way across, and my robotics is following me, and I'm coming to the very top left-hand corner now. And I'm going to hit my plus sign. And now I'm going to come down the outside of my left-hand border. And I'm watching my screen because I want to come down and kind of make this little purple line, this little purple line here. I'm just waiting until that's kind of flat and level with my crosshairs. That way I know I'm kind of directly across from my start point. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I'm going to hit my check mark. So now you can see in yellow on my display, I've got, let me move this out of the way, I've got kind of a big U shape. So that is going to take care of the top of my border and then down my sides a little bit. Now, I'm not sure yet if my design is going to fit in here or if I'm going to need to roll my quilt and remark this, but we'll see how things go. This just gives you a general idea of how to mark out that border using your layout box. It may be a little bit different for you depending on how wide your quilt is and how much frame space you have available. I think between my front roller bar and my back roller bar, I have close to 14 inches on this machine, but my other machine, I only have about 12, so it can vary. All right, so let's go ahead and start choosing our patterns to put in here. I am going to go to my patterns, and I'm going to look through my designs here, and I believe, I'm not sliding very well today. Believe I've got some designs here that have corner pieces and border pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one here. This is actually a corner piece. So I'm going to add this, and it's put it here in the corner for me, but I'm going to need one in my opposite corner as well. And I'm going to just repeat this one before I start sizing it. So I'm going to come over here to the left-hand side of my display, or the right-hand side of my display, right-hand side of my display, and hit my plus sign. And when I do that, it's given me a second one. But for this to fit over in this corner, I'm going to have to mirror image it. So I'm going to come over here again to the right-hand side of my display, and I'm going to use my left to right mirror image. And now it's flipped that design around for me. And I'm going to just take it with my finger on the green circled node that's in the center and move it to the other corner. Okay, so I've got a corner and a corner here, but they're a little too big. They go outside my yellow border that I just marked out. So we're going to need to size these a little bit, and I'm just going to use my blue nodes to move them into the space a little bit better. So as I touch on this blue node here, it's just going to shrink my design up just a little bit and get it inside my yellow dotted line, which is my border marks. And I'm a little out here on the top, so I'm just going to pull this one in on the top just a smidge to get inside my lines. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to get myself inside my yellow dotted lines with my design. And I'm trying to make them match because we want our two corners to match as closely as possible. I don't think anybody would notice if it was a little bit off, but we want it to be as close as possible. I'm just double checking here to make sure my design is fully inside my corners. I'm really close, so I'm going to just pop this up just another little hair, make sure I'm in there. So there's our two corners set. Now we need to fill in our space in here. So I'm going to go back to patterns and scroll down to that design group. And I'm going to choose this one that says it's the border that matches that corner. So I'm going to choose that and hit my check mark. And it's put it over top of my corner, so I can just grab it with the green node and move it so I can see it. And then I'm going to want another one over here. So I'm going to come over to the right hand side of my display again and hit my plus sign so it duplicates it for me. But I'm going to want to mirror image this one too, so that I've kind of got the mirror image from side to side on both ends. So once again, I'm going to come over to the right hand side of my display and hit that left to right mirror image. And now I've got mirror images on both. But we can see that I am outside of my yellow design space or my border space. So we're going to have to shrink these guys down a little bit too. And I want my green start and my red stop points to match. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this guy over with my green move button and get it lined up a little bit. And then I'm going to use my blue nodes to just shrink this little guy down. If you're not comfortable with using your touch screen, you can always use your move button and your scale buttons that are over here on the right hand side of your display. I'm just really comfortable with using my touch screen, so I enjoy just using that and making the changes happen right there on the display. All right, I'm okay with this, and for me, I'm okay with these not quite touching in the center, but if I wanted to do that, I could just stretch each design out slightly and get those two little points to match there. Okay, so they match, but for me, this little gap here is a problem, and I'm going to have to fill that in because if I'm filling in a border, I want that border filled all the way in. So let's go ahead and grab another design element to just pop in there. So I'm going to go back to my patterns, and we're going to scroll back down to the group, and there is a little cutie here that I think might work. So I'm going to choose this. Once again, it's popped it all the way over here on top of what we've already been working on. So we're just going to touch that and highlight it. And I'm going to use my green node to move it. But once again, if you're more comfortable, you can go ahead and use your move buttons that are over here. So I've got this moved kind of in place, but it's overlapping. So I'm going to flip this with my mirror image top to bottom and see if that fits a little bit better. So that looks okay. I'm gonna just shrink it a little bit just so I don't have any overlapping lines. I want it to be a full design and not bleed into the ones next to it. There we go. I'm really picky. I've got to make sure that's just exactly the way I want it. This is where I'm using my grid. I'm eyeballing to make sure that everything's kind of spacing out. You know, I'm lining up the tip of this design with where the points are meeting here, and then I'm kind of counting the space with the grid in between the designs to try and get everything centered and sized where I think it looks okay. I'm going to pull this side out just a little bit. So I'm just trying to make this even, and that's where using all your grid spacing can become helpful. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with this. So now I've got my top border. Let's pull back. So now I've got my top border filled in. And I'm going to see if I can get something filled in the sides here. I don't know, because of the size of, I'll probably use this design and come on down. Because of the size of this design, I don't know if it's going to fit into this space without me shrinking it too much. So I might have to stitch out this top border, roll my quilt a little bit, and then create new pattern boxes for the sides and go ahead and fill in from there. We'll just look at it and see what happens. So I'm going to go back to my patterns and back to our pattern group. And this was that border one we were using right here. So I'm going to highlight that and put my check mark, and it's put it over here once again, but I need to rotate this so it stands up on end so I can get it into this slot. So we have our rotate button here, or we can highlight and use our little red nodule here to rotate it. But for this circumstance, I know I want to rotate it exactly 90 degrees, so I'm just going to hit my buttons and have the robotics do it for me instead of me trying to get it perfect. 2 clicks of a button. So now I'm going to go ahead and move this into place. And I'm going to make sure that that stop point here kind of lands on the corner. But as you can see, this design comes outside of my border a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this in so it's the same height as the other ones. And I'm going to just see what happens if I make it a little bit shorter. It might get too squatty and I might not like it. So, you know, this is where that whole trial and error thing comes in, where you decide if you like it or not. I don't actually think that looks too bad. It's a little bit smaller than this one up here, but the integrity of the design looks good. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here to the right-hand side of my display and hit that plus sign again. And it's popped it in over here. So we're going to need to move that over to the right-hand side, and we're going to have to mirror image this. So I'm going to go ahead and mirror image it first. So I'm going to use that right hand, left hand mirror image button here. And that's flip my design around. Ooh. You know, that's actually, I gave you the wrong one because we turned it on its side. We actually have to use the top to bottom mirror image, not the right to left. So you'll hit the top to bottom mirror image, not the right to left, because we actually rotated this design. So let's go ahead and move this guy and get it into place. And I shrunk it down a little too much when I touched it. So I might need to make this guy a little bit bigger here. And I'm matching my corners. Okay, let's see if I can get this on screen for you guys. So I'm gonna just make it a little bit wider, but still in my yellow lines, make sure I'm fitting my whole space. All right. So I've got my sides filled in here, and I've got my top filled in. So when we come out for a full view, you can see that I've got that whole border space filled in. We can go ahead, and if we want at this point, we can merge our design so that all this becomes one piece. So I'm going to hit merge, and now it's taken my start and stop points and have dealt with that a little bit. I'm going to see what happens when I hit my swap start to stop point. That doesn't really do anything but change those two. So I'm fine with it the way it is. I've got a couple of really long jump stitches in here. That's okay. It's going to ask me to start and stop with tying off, cutting my threads in between these big jumps. And that's okay. They're just a couple of big jumps here. And the other thing you might want to do after you've taken the time to do all of this work is save all of this work. So you can always go to your save button here. And I'm going to type in border design and hit my check mark. And it saved it for me. That way, if something happens and I have to walk away before I stitch this out, or I want to maybe use all of this same information for when I get to the other side of the quilt. I've got all of this resized. I might be able to reuse it. I've got this design saved. It's not saving necessarily the layout, it's just saving my design. So that is one way for you to fill in a border. I'm going to go ahead and work on stitching this out, and I'll be back with you in a little while. All right, everybody, back with you. I have got that border started and stitched out. So you can see that I've got the design here and it follows all the way along. Oop, let me get under my machine. All the way along. Here's that little one that we popped there in the center just to fill in that space. So I think everything looks really good. So it's going to be time for me to advance my quilt and start the next pattern box. I'm going to start it probably up here because my end point of that design is right here. So I'm going to overlap a little bit so that I can connect the little, I don't know, half circles. I want to be able to connect those designs with each other. So I'm going to start my next pattern box up a little bit higher so that I can start my designs next to each other. I don't want y'all to think that I didn't plan this out and I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. I do know, because I did the math on it first with the size of my quilt, that I'll be able to do this corner and this piece again, plus 3 more of these little pieces here to kind of fill in the whole border. So I did do my math ahead of time. I know how this is all going to fit. So make sure you do your math and plan out, play with it on your machine. But I think this turned out really nice for this method of filling in a border. I hope that helps you all out with just one of the ways you can fill in a border. It's nothing super scary. It's really just making a pattern box that's in a little bit different of a shape. You can put down as many points as you need to follow along those borders to get your shape. And then there's just a lot of pattern manipulation. So you're resizing and you're moving and you're rotating, and you might be doing your mirror image a lot just to get all of your designs to fit the way you want. But you may have a very simple border design and it looks the same on both ends, where it will be really easy to fill in and you won't have to do all of that work. So take your time with it, be creative, have a good time, and hopefully next week I will bring you a different style of border work so that you have options to look at. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great weekend ahead of you. Bye-bye.